This Guy's Garage. Like and subscribe.
It's with a heavy heart that I announce my resignation as a Member of Parliament for Cloverdale-Langley City, effective May 31st.
Oral questions. Questions orales. L'honorable.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
After 9 years, this Prime Minister, this NDP Liberal Prime Minister, is not worth the cost of mortgages, 76% of which will become more expensive over the next 3 years, according to the federal banking regulator, OSFI. This after the Prime Minister said rates would stay low for long. We know that his massive government deficits have driven rates up 2 percentage points higher than they otherwise would be, according to Scotiabank. So will he accept my common sense dollar-for-dollar plan to cap spending and cut waste to bring down interest rates so Canadians keep their homes?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, we know the truth. The Conservatives don't actually care about Canadians who are struggling to pay their mortgages. And we know that because when we put forward something very concrete to support those Canadians, the strengthened Canadian Mortgage Charter, they refuse to support it. When we put forward a plan to help first-time home buyers with 30-year mortgage amortizations, the Conservatives voted against it. The fact is, the only thing these Conservatives know how to do is cut, 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 and the only Canadians they care about are themselves.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, we have voted against everything this Prime Minister has done to balloon the cost of living of Canadians, to increase food bank use by 50% over 3 years, to send 1/4 of all young people to the food bank in 3 months alone, 1/4 of all Canadians skipping meals because they cannot afford a home, a 38% increase in homelessness since 2019. 50 new homeless encampments in Toronto, now a total of 256 of them in the biggest city in the country. Why is it that the more they spend, the more Canadians hurt?
Here, here, here. The Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, we will take no lessons from the Conservatives when it comes to supporting the most vulnerable Canadians. The fact is, when we formed government and when they left government, the poverty rate in Canada was 14.5%. It is now 9.9%. The Canada Child Benefit has lifted hundreds of thousands of children out of poverty. The GIS helps 900,000 seniors. The only thing they know how to do is cut, cut, cut. Tory times are hard times, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
We know how to cut taxes, Mr. Speaker, and that is why we reduced poverty and had affordable homes 9 years ago when common sense Conservatives were in government. Since that time, housing costs have doubled, mortgage payments have doubled, rent has doubled. The number of homeless encampments in Canada is up by hundreds of percent. We now have 1 in 4 Canadians skipping meals because they can't afford the cost of food. Will the government finally stop the policies that make Canadians poor, get off the backs of the working people, and let Canadians keep their homes?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, we know what the Conservatives really believe and what they really do. When this leader was in government, how many homes did he actually get built? 6, Mr. Speaker. Just 6 homes. We know what Conservatives do to programs that support the most vulnerable. Cut, cut, cut. We have put forward a national school food program, a dental care program, national early learning and child care. They want to cut those programs. We won't let them, Mr. Speaker.
top, as 1 in 4 Canadians are food insecure. It's because this carbon tax scam leaves Canadians with less money in their pockets, food in their bellies, and fuel in their cars. This Prime Minister and this carbon tax scam are not worth the cost. Conservatives are calling for all federal fuel taxes to be axed this summer so Canadian families can save an average of $670. Will this road-raging finance minister stop the road trip wrecking and implement this common-sense Conservative ask, yes or no?
The Honourable Minister of Finance and Deputy Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the only thing the Conservatives believe in is austerity, and the only thing they know how to do is cut, cut, cut. That's why it is no surprise that they would like to cut the carbon rebates that are putting more money back in the pockets of 8 out of 10 Canadians. It is no surprise that they want to cut a national school food program. It's no surprise they want to cut our national early learning and childcare plan. Mr. Speaker, they have no real plan, but they're letting the country burn.
The Honourable Member from Calgary, Forest Lawn.
No doubt we will cut the carbon tax scam that will leave more money in Canadians' pockets. And she wants to talk about a food program. That food program has no food in it. The only thing these guys have been feeding over the last 9 years is the already obese government. What common sense Conservative governments are going to do is we're going to axe a tax for good. Why don't they just call a carbon tax election so we can show them how it's done anyways?
The Honourable Minister for Natural Resources and Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is incredibly disappointing to see the misleading information that the honourable member actually puts forward. It is very clear. 300 economists, the parliamentary budget officer, have said 8 out of 10 Canadian families get more money back. Our approach is one that actually addresses the existential threat of climate change, does so in a manner that is actually affordable for Canadians. And to be honest with you, his constituents should be asking him, I'm sure they are, why he campaigned on putting in place a price for pollution in the last election and now is actually taking such a hypocritical position.
The Honourable Member from Niagara Falls.
After 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, Canadians are hungry and homeless. 2 million Canadians are now visiting food banks each month, and the Salvation Army just reported 1 in 4 Canadians have skipped or reduced the size of at least one meal because they cannot afford to buy groceries. In Niagara Falls, Project Share served more than 13,000 people last year, or 1 in 7 residents. Instead of piling on more taxes and making life more expensive, when will this NDP Liberal government axe the tax to provide the relief struggling Canadians so badly need?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Of course, 10 years ago, when the party opposite was in power, there were over 2 million more people in poverty. So it's a little bit difficult to take their protestations when they had the opportunity and they didn't talk about these issues. But I have a direct question for the Conservatives. When you're dealing with a senior, like a senior who this week will for the first time in 41 years get dentures in their mouth, a senior who has had plastic plates, that's all they have left to crush food in their mouth, I have a very simple question. Do they believe that senior should get dentures, and will they support making sure that she does?
Mr. Speaker, this NDP Liberal government is receiving a failing grade in Newfoundland and Labrador. Back home, according to Food Banks Canada and its annual poverty report card, almost half are paying more than 30% of their earnings to house themselves. 40% are worried about feeding themselves. Mr. Speaker, after 9 years, this NDP Liberal Prime Minister is not worth the hunger and the homelessness. So will he listen to the premiers who begged him to axe the tax so that people can feed and house themselves?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, if my honourable colleague opposite really wanted to do something for Newfoundlanders and Labradorians and all Atlantic Canadians, he'd vote to pass the fall economic statement, because that would mean $1,430 to families of 4 in his riding. That means $2,160 to family of 4 in Alberta, $1,805 to families in Saskatchewan, $1,440 to families in Manitoba, $1,300 to families in Ontario, $912 to families in New Brunswick. That's how we help Canadians.
The honourable member from Costa Bay Central, Notre Dame.
Mr. Speaker, I find that a bit rich coming from my colleague from Long Range Mountains who voted against Bill C-251, against the sealing industry, against the fishing industry, against the people in our very own riding, Madam Speaker, or Mr. Speaker. But you know what? Back to the matter at hand here. 45% back home have an inadequate standard of living. 35% have a severely inadequate standard of living. 26% are experiencing food insecurity. So after 9 years, while this NDP Liberal Prime Minister, who's not worth the hunger and not worth the homelessness, axe the tax and listen to the premiers of back home.
The Honourable Minister for Rural Economic Development and for COA.
Mr. Speaker, I'll tell you what we do on this side of the House. On this side of the House, we support communities. We support businesses. So I'd love to know the member opposite's comment to the 181 projects that COA has funded in his riding that supported 64 businesses, 43 not-for-profit organizations, and he voted against every single one of those, Mr. Speaker. That's supporting businesses. That's supporting communities. That's what we do, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Northumberland, Peterborough South.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years as NDP Liberal government, Canadians are in trouble. On Thursday, we learned from an OFSI risk report that Canadian homeowners who renew their mortgages in 2026 will be facing a payment shock. What this means is that as of February 2024, 76% of Canadians are in jeopardy of losing their homes. After 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, many Canadians are now facing the very real fact they will be losing their homes. These Liberals are just not worth the cost. Will the Liberals commit today to stopping their inflationary spending, to drive down interest rates, to make housing affordable, so that Canadians can keep their homes?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, as we have been making clear throughout question period, the only thing the Conservatives want to do is cut, and actually put taxes back on home builders. But when it comes to fiscal policy, Mr. Speaker, let me quote the Parliamentary Budget Officer speaking last week in the other place. Canada compares rather favorably on a debt to GDP ratio when compared to G7 countries. We are probably the least or second least indebted country. Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives are absolutely wrong about everything, including fiscal policy.
Very gently, I'd just like to ask the honourable member from Cumberland Colchester to please only take the floor when he is recognised to be. Sorry, did I say Cumberland Colchester? My Dufferin Caledon. My apologies. Now the honourable member from Northumberland, Peterborough South has the floor.
Well, in the next election, we'll let Canadians decide exactly who is wrong. And if you listen to these Liberals talk about this, you would think they never had it so good. The truth, it couldn't be any further. The fact is, we have tent cities from coast to coast. We have students who are living underneath bridges. We have workers who are living in their cars. You know what? If these Liberals won't listen to Canadians, if they won't listen to Conservatives, listen to your own regulators. Stop the spending, drive down costs, so Canadians can keep their homes.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Well, Mr. Speaker, there will, of course, be a next election, and at that moment in time, Canadians will be able to look at who has the record of stepping up and supporting vulnerable people. And I can say to you, the record of the Conservative Party of Canada in this country in standing up and fighting for vulnerable people, fighting for people who don't have homes, fighting for people who are in poverty is abysmal, Mr. Speaker, and that's just the plain facts. Every time they had a chance to stand up and fight for those that were in need, they instead turned to ancient trickle-down economics that don't work, and they'll try it all over again. People have seen the game, they know what's up, and I don't think they're going to buy it.
Member from Peterborough Kawartha.
9 years of this Liberal NDP government, Canadians are hungry and homeless. In the Minister of Housing's own backyard, 10 people are going homeless every single week. 1 in 4 Canadians feel they don't even have enough money to live. Canadians are spending $60,000 4% of their income on housing, which under that Prime Minister has doubled. While 10 cities become normal and they gaslight Canadians and tell them they've never had it so good, Conservatives are fighting. So when will they wake up and vote in favour of our Build Homes, not bureaucracy bill?
Yeah!
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, my honourable colleague would like to talk about my community. I want to take an opportunity to thank the service providers at shelters like Viola's Place. I want to thank you to our partners at Cody's Place who are benefiting from a multi-million-dollar investment to build more affordable housing. I want to say thank you to the Antigonish Affordable Housing Society for partnering with us to build more units for vulnerable families in that community. But let's take a minute to talk about her community. She goes and shows up for ribbon cuttings for projects that we have funded when she voted against them in the House of Commons. It's important that our words match our actions if we're going to solve the housing crisis. I hope the Conservatives will do the same.